It's day one of the semifinals of the Freestyle Go Chess Challenge, and we are super pumped about the action that's coming up. We're at the stunning Weissen House. It's really calm outside, but inside in the playing arena, it's fierce competition. I'm Tanya Sachdev, alongside me, Grandmaster Peter Lecco. Peter, we had an incredible quarterfinals, some turnarounds. What was your big takeaway from the action?
Hello, Tanya. Hello, everyone. Wow. Okay, I think the biggest, the most sensational stuff was Magnus's comeback. Yeah, that you have to fight, and then he made it. Then he joined us in the studio, and I haven't seen such a relieved and exhausted Magnus at the same time. It just shows that what it meant for him to win that epic battle against Liren.
The GOAT stays on in the challenge, and it was a close call for Magnus Carlsen, who lost the first classical game but eventually went on to take it in tie breaks. A 3-1 score against Alireza. Heartbreaking for Alireza, who had such a great start against Magnus. Meanwhile, Fabiano Caruana was the dominating player against G.O.A.T. G.O.A.T. never really got his chances in that matchup. Vincent Levon was a close fight, but in the second classical game, it was all Levon. Vincent going wrong very early on in the opening stages. Meanwhile, Nodirbek, Peter, the guy is on fire.
Absolutely, and I can't wait to see Nodirbek Abdusattorov against Magnus Carlsen's match today in the semifinals. Magnus himself called him the man of the hour, the player who has played the best chess so far. Stunning performance in every single game, in every aspect of openings, beginning of the phase, middle games, tactics, strategics, end games. Everything what Nodirbek has done so far turned into gold.
Very well put. He's truly turning into a universal player at the absolute elite, the absolute best in the world. We're seeing him perform so well in the freestyle chess, in the round robin, finishing at the top with 5.5 out of 7, undefeated in the tournament. Then goes on to take down world champion Liren without much difficulty. And he's got a big challenge coming up in the semi-finals. Takes down the world champion. Now it's time to face the world #1. Some call him the final boss. Some say chess is him. Magnus Carlsen against Nodirbek is our big semi-finals matchup. And of course, another one, a classic chess battle between Levon Aronian and Fabiano Caruana. We see 3 kings and 1 jack in the semi-finals this time.
Yes, we were talking about this, that the kings are plotting something special. They might have felt that there is no way we're going to be able to fight all the 3 round-robin games, the rapid section with full power. They were kind of smart, adjusting, keeping. Levon was revealing that, yeah, he was definitely holding back and trying to give everything and to surprise Vincent in the classical portion. It worked to perfection. But whether this was really a strategy or it just happened like this, this we will never find out.
But it's time to get ready for the action that's coming up. It will be a best of 2 between the players, a mini match, 2 classical games before we go into the fast and furious tie breaks. And before we start the action for today, it was a very dramatic quarterfinals. Take a look.
Day 4, marking the second day of the quarterfinals at the Freestyle Chess Greatest of All Time Challenge in Weissen House, has begun. It's now more crucial than ever for the players to muster all their energy to advance to the semifinals.
The outcome of the tournament is still very open. Players are very close to each other. Everything depends on, maybe on one day the one player is playing very good, and the other day the other player is in a better shape. So you cannot really predict who's going to win at the end.
This tournament is not only unique because of its exclusiveness, but also wants to make chess accessible and interesting for everybody, and not only the chess community.
It's amazing to be here and to meet all these amazing players. I can see how they play, their movement, and how they plan. When I finish my experience here, I think I will be also a grandmaster of chess. Kidding.
Today, once again, Fabiano Caruana secures a victory against Gukesh Domaraju. Nodirbek Abdusattorov and Ding Liren are playing to a draw. Levon Aronian wins against Vincent Keimer.
I absolutely love it. It brings the excitement back in the game of chess. I think, for most of us. I mean, even when I was playing badly in the start, the rapid section, I was still enjoying it immensely.
Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Firouzja have the same score and are playing a tiebreaker. It's the most exciting game of the evening. In the end, Magnus, the greatest of all time, makes it into the semi-finals as he defeats Alireza Firouzja.
It's absolutely exhausting, but I think that's the way it's supposed to be. Chess to me is mainly a sport, and it's not supposed to be easy on the players. But it's really hard. It's really hard work.
And once again, an exciting day at Weissenhaus draws to a close. Be sure not to miss the semifinals at freestylechess.com.
There's a lot on the line, a lot to fight for. $60,000 is the first prize. It's the glory of winning a format that is truly pure chess from the very first move, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we have been seeing, for example, Vincent yesterday, I feel like he lost it right in the very first move. You have to be very careful, you have to take your time because there is no way back. These guys are the best players in the world. They punish you for every single slight inaccuracy in the opening. It's such a challenge for everyone.
And I'm just thinking about that Magnus comeback that we briefly touched upon earlier. For Alireza, he has this great start, right? He wins the first classical game, needs a draw on the second one, and things are also, Magnus comes back in form. Things are going fine, even in the rapid playoff. He manages to find the fortress. Magnus shaky in the round robin, coming back in the quarterfinals after the first round loss. How do you even beat this guy? How do you go ahead from him? And for Nodirbek, what are you expecting from him?
Well, Nodirbek should just continue to do what he has done so far. Easier said than done. He's facing Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. Also, one more big reveal in the players' meeting when there was a question, how do we decide who gets white in the knockout, in the first knockout games? Then Magnus pointed out that, yeah, definitely he would love to take the white pieces in the first game. And today he has it, yeah, in the semifinals, because in the quarterfinals we had the top 4 finishers of the round robin having the chance to select the color. All of them followed Magnus's advice to pick white, and now it's vice versa. So Magnus Carlsen starts with the white piece against Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Also knowing that Magnus had that dramatic tiebreak yesterday and that incredible fight against Alireza, he was exhausted. It's very important for Magnus to have the white pieces because it gives you so much more stability and you feel like you have things under control right from the start.
Nodirbek was incredible against Magnus in the round robin, but this is a totally different time control. It is the classical time control in Fischer Random Chess for the very first time, and that is what the players are fighting for. Right there on our screens, we see the positions from 5th to 8th. We will have matches between these players as well. There is a lot of money on the line at 5th place, $15,000 they fight for, but it is the big bucks at the top. The bragging rights of winning this tournament, $60,000 to the winner. The players who make it through to the semifinals are already guaranteed a very cool $40,000.
Well, no, semifinals 20,000. No, it's if they get to the finals,
they make it
then
through to the semifinals, then
yes,
they're guaranteed.
yeah, exactly. But already now it's kind of nice, yeah, that they already know that 20,000 is guaranteed whatever happens, and yeah, one more giant step forward, then it's about 60 and 40. Yeah, yes. Perfect. But I would not be forgetting about all the other guys. Yeah, the Jacks fighting out there, Vincent Kammer against Gukesh. That will be a prestige duel. Forget about the money. These youngsters want to win their match against each other. They will be giving it all. And Alireza Firouzja, after being knocked out by Magnus Carlsen in that crazy match, he will be looking forward to secure his 5th place just to show that, yes, you know, I missed out on the semifinals, but I belong there. And Liren will be fighting for his honor. So there is so much at stake there as well.
A lot to fight for, and this is the format going into the semi-finals. It's the same as the quarterfinals, a mini match between the players, a 2-game mini match played over 2 days. They start with 90 minutes. There's no increment until the 41st move, after which they get 30 seconds every time they press a clock and an additional 30 minutes. And it's always so interesting to see the kind of time scrambles that the players have, even reaching that 40 move mark, just simply because they have to start thinking already. From move 1 onwards, we've seen them spend such a big chunk of time in the first 10 moves, but that's what this format demands, because otherwise you can land up in huge trouble right out of the opening, and we saw that happen in so many games, Peter.
Yes, and one thing I want to highlight now that suddenly we are talking about it, yeah, the time control. Well, in the classical portion, yeah, we have already seen 8 classical games being played and none of those games really passed the 40 move, right? Almost automatically after the time control, all of the games had been finished, which means, or what does it mean? Well, it means that here the player starts from the very first move and the action is heating up much faster than in the classical chess portion. So it's something to think about. I feel like, yeah, the players have to make sure, yeah, they have to make sure to control the openings. The first 5 moves, I believe, are the most important because these guys are so strong that once they get a good position or they get stable position, they can do everything.
And in just a few moments from now, we will have the reveal of the position for Game 1 of the semi-finals. The playing arena is ready. Let's head over to Fiona.
Thank you very much, Tanya and Peter. Up in the studio, we are ready now for today's drawing of the position, and I would like to warmly welcome to the stage Holly and Teresa Sara, Miss Angola International. Give them a round of applause. Welcome again. Holly, you know the drill. Number
652.
Number 652, thank you very much. We'll see the new position appear behind us in a second. Back to the studio. For the players and our guests, as always.
Queen and king.
It's Queen and King. And wow. Peter, you had a reaction when this position was pulled up, and it's quite different from anything that we've seen so far. We see the minor pieces on either flanks. The bishops are not connected to each other. The knight's far away. The king and queen have switched up. The only piece that is in its standard chess position is the rook on the rooks on the A file. Peter, what was your reaction when you saw this? Because this is a unique one out of all the unique ones we've seen.
Yes, I don't recall having seen the white king on d1 and the black king on d8. This is something special, especially like this, that the queen is next to it on e1. It always feels a bit awkward for any chess player because, okay, we are so used to king on e1, queen on d1, and the queen is next to the king. We might be hearing the players, I think.
Positions are revealed. We're trying to get visuals from the playing arena as the players are. And it's also going to be interesting who discusses with who today. Just 4 players in the semi-finals, but there are also 4 players fighting it out in the lower bracket. While we wait for our live update from the arena, we're also trying to dive deeper. Chat, tell us what you think about this position. What would be your starting move here? How do you see this one developing?
E5, queen g6, yeah? E5. It's unpleasant, I think. Unless, but f4, I don't know. Doesn't look. Queen will not get caught, I think. It's possible, yeah? D4? Yeah, yes. Like this, yeah? Okay. But this doesn't look good for white, I think. Knights are. That's C4, E5.
Oh, and as the players are discussing, we are discussing as well trying to dive deeper into this quite a complex starting position. And of course, we've got help at hand as our other commentators joining us, Grandmaster Nicholas. Nicholas, welcome. It's been quite the start and quite the position we have for game one of the semifinals.
Thank you, Tanya, and also from me, a warm welcome to the first game of the semifinals here at Weissenhaus on the Baltic Sea. This is the position that the players have to figure out now in the next few minutes before they get into it and start the game, and it is quite a tricky one. At first sight, you might almost think, oh, this looks somewhat normal, rook, king and queen in the center, but the closer you look, you see there's a lot of stuff mixed up here. And we're discussing how to involve the pieces, and of course, the big question is how you start the game, here. And Tanya, you were just saying you would love to move this pawn 2 squares forward to immediately open up the queen and immediately open up the bishop. And I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly. Other than that, what do we see? The knight here in the corner is a question. What to do with the king? A lot of questions. This seems like a difficult position, Peter.
Yes, exactly. My very first concern when I looked at the position that if we tried to control the center, like with d4, then I was worried that maybe after d4, e5 could happen, and I don't know exactly. This is some kind of a Scandinavian, it's a very strange kind of Scandinavian. D takes e5, queen takes e5. How do we evaluate this? White can jump out with the knight to d3, but then black's queen is moving somewhere. Transformation of pawn structure, very difficult to judge. I think it's very scary to think about this. You are trying to explore other options. Then if you play e4, which we have seen quite a lot yesterday, you definitely have to think about a move like f5. Does it work or not? Because after e takes f5, there's even queen h5 check, for example.
I think we're getting some audio also about what the players are discussing.
Yeah, let's hear it. And it's the same team, Nodirbek, Vincent and Fabiano.
But okay, we can eat guys here in worst case. More or less.
Yeah, it's not a problem,
Oh, and we saw Fabi, Vincent, Nodirbek together. We're seeing Ding and Levon here analyzing. And we saw Magnus on the board by himself.
Bishop is not this game.
If the knight is already on c4, that's that's a middle game position.
Queen gets active.
If I myself.
This 4 and 5. What the F6? Not sure.
Now we see some ideas being discussed in this very complex position, really different from all the freestyle chess positions that we've had so far, the way the pieces are placed. We still have some audio coming in. And Levon and Ding are discussing the plan that we were looking at earlier. Move that f-pawn, clear up the path for the queen and the bishop. Peter, you've highlighted it with the arrows, and a possible response with d5. Even after all these days, it's so strange for me to say d4, d5 with kings behind the d-pawn.
Yes, absolutely. So let me even put it. They were highlighting f4 as their main move. It was also your choice, Tanya, I believe. Somewhat surprised that they, or at least Levon from the black side, was insisting that, okay, if f4, I'm going to play d5, yeah? His intuition is d5. To me, d5 is quite a scary move, advancing that pawn in front of the king. Do you remember that I was saying that if white plays d4, my main concern was what happens after e5 if things are immediately blowing up. Maybe it's a bad move, maybe it's a risky move, but something that is very much on my mind. And I see that, for example, after f4, d5, if we would just be seeing something like e4, d takes e4, queen takes e4, I did hear Levon was claiming somewhere some knight c4. I can only imagine that, okay, black will certainly try to get that tempo with knight d6.
Queen d4.
And then the queen d4, yeah, you are trying to hit the g7. You wanted to target that pawn, but I'm not sure that because the queen on d4 is a bit of a strange piece, maybe an f6, and then we are running into some e5. I wanted to place that queen maybe back on f3 on the long diagonal. Can we just put it there, queen f3, for example? And then I'm trying to occupy the center with d4 and then knight d3. That would be the grip that Fabiano received yesterday against G.O.A.T.
And we've got our players ready. Chat, we want you to get involved. What do you think will be the outcome of this match that we're seeing in front of us? I think it's time to get our player cards, Peter. I've got Nodirbek, one of the jacks in the tournament, and he's playing against the big king, the final boss, as they call him, Magnus Carlsen. Who do you think will win this battle between it's a battle of the generations, and right now Nodirbek looks like such a beast in this format. Magnus Carlsen shaky in the start, but has found his rhythm, especially the kind of chess he showed yesterday. It's go time, it's lift off, but as always, the players will not rush their first moves.
Well, maybe with white you could, especially now Magnus has spent 10 minutes by himself. Yeah, I feel like if you are spending 10 minutes by yourself, then probably you can somehow already come up with a first move decision. A solution, I almost said solution, but no, we don't know what is the right solution. It's just a try. Everybody's in the dark. Nobody knows exactly what the best move is. We have seen Magnus relying on e4 quite sometimes. Yesterday, also Abdusattorov was going for e4, but to me still this f4 and then Levon claiming that he goes d5. No. f4, let's be just, solid, old school. F4, f5 okay. Would be my choice. No, Magnus is just shadowing. Yes.
I thought he was reaching that e-pawn first, but Magnus just setting up his pieces there. And the thing about Magnus Carlsen, and we often speak about this, is that he just lives rent-free in so many of his opponents' heads. He's just able to get into their head. It's hard to kind of combat the fact that you're playing against Magnus, but that's not true for the younger generation. And I was looking at the cameras and their body language when they were sitting down. Nodirbek, again, just comes to the board. He's looking so confident.
Well, Nodirbek cannot be intimidated. This you already know. Yeah, he has won enough games against Magnus Carlsen to know that, yes, a game against Magnus is something special, but it's just an everyday business, yeah, for him already. Magnus himself revealed that he's very impressed by the tremendous fighting spirit. And yes, if you already know that this boy has already beaten you quite some time, and Magnus goes g4, all right, okay, that's stopping f5. So it's not just grabbing space. Clearly, White is also trying to activate the knight to g3. So I would like to, I wanted to highlight that in the bird's eye view, two boards did not have the right starting position, so let's not get fooled by it. We will stick now for the Magnus Carlsen show. g4 on the board, certainly a move that Nodirbek couldn't have expected. Yeah, that's also a surprise element, and I believe that Magnus in this regard might have tremendous respect for the team of Nodirbek, Fabiano and Vincent. He wants to get them out of preparation, and it's a very clever strategy, yeah, because he was the one who probably spent 10 minutes on thinking about g4, and it might be a complete surprise to Nodirbek.
And we saw him sitting by himself at the start as well. He wasn't analyzing with any of the players, so trying to counter these ideas. He calls it the anti-young player chess when he's playing standard chess, and maybe it's some of that as well in freestyle as well, taking away some of the key ideas for black to open up the position like f5, and also the concept, what we've been talking about, the recurring theme of pawns ahead of the knight. Once that knight lands on g3, because of this pawn, you've got such a nice hold on the position. The knight feels a lot more stable on the g3 square. So Magnus there, well, it's hard to say getting in a surprise in this format because everything's a surprise. But definitely g4 was not even on our radar.
No, not at all. Yeah, you are automatically focused on the most natural moves, yeah, and the central moves are kind of the most natural every time. I believe also maybe if the boards are ready, we could be having a bird's eye view just to see that what kind of first moves did we see in the other games.
We will try to bring up our bird's eye view really soon, Peter, to get the first look into the positions. But meanwhile, I want to turn to Nicholas. Nicholas, a move that's taken us by surprise. Looks like something that Magnus had in his mind when he was sitting by himself. What is your take on 1g4?
It has certainly taken us by surprise, and probably also Nodirbek, who's taking a first think here. g4 in the first move. It wasn't on our radar at all, and to be frank, it's also not the engine's preferred choice. The engine would have liked to go either f4 or e4 in this position, and I think we have at least one game with e4, or I believe even two. And g4 was not on the radar because it is not fighting for the center squares, and it's also a bit odd to me that you want to try maybe to involve this knight first on g3, maybe, as Peter was saying, to stop any f5 action. And well, Nodirbek has different choices now. Tanya, you always like to point out the hanging pawns in a position, and there are actually two, the pawn on g7 and the pawn on b7. And if a bishop or a queen lands there, it could be quite unpleasant. So this is also something to watch out for. g4 on the board, definitely we'll see a very different approach in the different games here. Magnus certainly surprising us and Nodirbek with his first choice.
And Magnus makes the move, he immediately leaves. And we can see Nodirbek, despite having looked into the position, delved deeper with Fabi, with Vincent, is in a think right now. It's definitely a move he wasn't expecting either. Let's bring up our bird's eye view, and there we have it, the approaches by the players. We don't see a 1f4 on any of the boards. So that was a move that we were looking at, a move that Ding and Levon were analyzing. We've got Magnus starting with g4. Meanwhile, a more, I want to say, classical setup approach by Levon against Fabiano. We see an e4, the king's pawn opening, but in this case, it's the queen's pawn opening moving forward, and an early knight jump. So some central standard chess ideas there. We also see on the Alireza board another approach of opening up with the central queen's pawn. I think we need to adjust
the pieces are not right in the lower bracket.
We will get to that. So Alireza's board and Vincent board, we need to adjust on that, but we see that there are different starting moves on by most of the players here.
Yes, and Abdusattorov did take his time. Okay, 4 minutes. If you are surprised, one could argue that it's only 4 minutes. But he has made a very sensible move. It was the move that kind of came to my mind as well as the automatic question. Yeah, if White is doing something on the flank, why can't we just occupy the center with e5? We have also seen some games started with the move 1e4, which makes also perfect sense. And then it's clear that, yeah, there we have it. Now everything is correct. So Gukesh has played 1 e4 against Vincent. Now Vincent learning his lesson yesterday by rushing with the first move that went on to bite him and cost him the chance of fighting for the semifinals, because he never got a chance to really challenge Levon there yesterday. We do see Ding Liren playing d4 f5 c3, the setup that that Levon did yesterday against Vincent, but there is a big difference because the rook on f8 is protecting the f5 pawn. So black does not need to worry about that hanging pawn and goes c6, opens up the bishop on b8. Alireza is always famous for playing quite quickly with a lot of confidence in the beginning phase. And what about Levon Aronian and Fabiano? It's e4, e5, and then when did they play f3? Probably
now, just now. f3 is the move that Levon just made.
Aha, so second move was knight g3.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect, because it stops f5, then f6, f3, and that's how we reach this position.
And we're seeing the same approach on Gukesh's board as well. So Gukesh and Levon going for a similar opening structure with opening up with e4 and then getting the knight out. And now for Vincent, will he also feel that f6 is the way to go, as Fabi did? As you wait into this one, Peter, I'm going to let you decide which approach should we dive deeper into at the moment.
Well, just very quickly, because I already have the Magnus Carlsen Abdusattorov game anyway up on our screens, and also here the move knight g3 f6 appeared. It's a completely different kind of dynamic because black has now the center, Magnus has some flank control with the g4 pawn, knight came to g3. It's somehow a very deep strategy. Yeah, if you ask me immediately, I'm thinking that maybe Magnus is probably hinting at an f4. The reason why even I didn't know if I dare to say it or not, because it's a very double-edged move. f4 does challenge the center, but it runs into some e takes f4, rook takes f4, and maybe just some c6, opening up that bishop with a tempo hitting the rook. And then black gets one extra tempo to solve his development issues. So because of this, I'm not a fan of f4. But if we don't do f4, then isn't black just threatening to occupy the center perfectly with d5? Something that Magnus has done yesterday against Alireza, right? He just got this e4, d4, f3 construction and was very happy.
Really nicely pointed out that f4 is the idea that you want to make, but you have to calculate all these dynamics in position. I also want to highlight another factor, that in this position, the most natural looking move, trying to get the knight out, you have to really watch out for threats. We've been looking at what are the pawns which are hanging, and knight g3 also sets up a really cunning trick. If black was to play copycat of bringing the knight out for development, white immediately jumps in with a knight beater, and suddenly there's no good way for defending the g7 pawn. And I'm going to make this even more fun. Make another development move, and you just lose the queen on move number 4. And of course this wouldn't happen, but just the kind of ideas that exist and why you have to be so careful from the very start in freestyle chess.
Yes, the first moves are very important, getting the harmony, but I do feel that Abdusattorov has reacted very well with e5 and f6. It's a very flexible structure. First of all, he made sure that the g7 pawn can be guarded beautifully. Yeah, so now I believe knight f5 would be kind of premature because, okay, there should be a way to protect this pawn, queen f7, queen g6, okay, and then...
Maybe even g6.
Yeah, maybe even g6, yeah, because it's a tempo. Yeah, so jumping in there is nothing. And how is Magnus trying to control the center? One could argue that, okay, then if we say that the center is so important, maybe white should play e4, but that weakens the f4 square. Yeah, then black can eventually jump with the knight to g6, and we don't want to leave such holes, especially because black can reinforce the control of that f4 square with c6, opening up the bishop, a theme which we already have seen by Alireza. He opted for c6, opening up his bishop, and lot of questions. Magnus taking his time, now he's going really deep into the position, but I somehow feel that the opening, we have just seen 2 moves, went very much according to Nodirbek's liking. He is in excellent shape, he has shown brilliant chess, and he has solved all his openings problems in the first 2 moves.
All right, Peter, impressed with Nodirbek's first couple of moves here, taking the structure and the trap that we were just pointing out, a move that would work if Black had developed. I think we have to show this on the board as well, just to show once again the tricks that actually exist and why f6 is such a smart move. If you try and get aggressive with the knight, you go all the way in and it's the knight getting trapped. There's no way home. Nicholas, we're impressed with the way Nodirbek's handled Magnus's g4 knight g3. Do you agree with that? And how do you see White progressing in this?
Yeah, it's not so clear, and Peter said it perfectly. Magnus maybe should have taken a little bit more time on the very first move, because g4 was not a very challenging move, leaving the center to Black, allowing Nodirbek to play e5, occupy the center, to play f6, and the bishop is coming into play. I was going through some different lines here. For example, f4, as Peter mentioned, but the play seems pretty straightforward here, gaining a tempo on the rook. As Peter also pointed out, knight g6, the rook drops back, and now I think d5 looks very natural. You can put the knight behind, you can maybe play c6 and develop the bishop as well, and you can think about long castle at some point, and the black position is looking good, in my eyes at least. So if you don't go f4, we have a move, d4, whoa,
Wow.
d4, he's sacrificing a pawn. This pawn is not protected. d4, what a move.
Yeah, so
Maybe a
ED4,
drastic
Queen
measure.
B4, yeah, is the idea with double attack.
Queen b4 or maybe f4 here, either one. Queen b4, double attack on b7 and d4. What an unusual move, but you do lose some time, and the engine is not a fan here of the white position. I'd rather would like to see probably f4, but also here. All right, well, this can get quite sharp quite quickly. d4 again taking us by surprise, Peter.
Wow, I feel like it's something of a desperation for Magnus. I don't know, he maybe was not happy. We have seen him on camera, he didn't look so happy, and he might felt that he needs to change something. But going for a gambit like this, it's kind of strange. Where is the initiative? Yeah, and Nodirbek is someone. If you are fooling with him if you try to fool with him like this, it can easily backfire, because he is not intimidated. We talked about this already. Grabbing the pawn makes perfect sense, and well, if even the computer wasn't exactly sure, then we can try to speculate ourselves. Yeah, that what is Magnus really think about? Is f4 really, for example, such a natural move? Okay, then the bishop is trying to hit the pawn on d4. Black could potentially protect that pawn with c5. Then will we see some Danish gambit with c3? Is that what Magnus is plotting? I believe so. That would be at least in the spirit. Let me even put it on the board just to highlight what we are talking about. So now white after f4 is trying to take on d4, and if black protects that pawn, which is very natural because it opens the bishop, then white can maybe try this pawn sacrifice with c3. Magnus yesterday revealed us that when he played rook f1 against Aliza, he was worried of the pawn sacrifice with d5. Is this something that he felt like he learned from that game? I'm completely in the dark speculating. I'm shocked.
Just insanity on the board from the very start. A pawn sacrifice by Magnus, playing for the initiative. I was also looking at Nodirbek when d4 happened. It's almost like he's enjoying seeing this on the board. He's taking this like a big challenge, and he knows that from the very start, it's going to be a position that's going to get wild for both the players, and it can be a big opportunity for Nodirbek if the pawn sacrifice goes wrong and if Magnus is not able to prove the initiative. And Peter, we definitely will be looking more at this, but I think for just a moment, let's zoom out to our bird's eye view and get a quick update on the other boards. And then perhaps, to me, what strikes is that, in fact, that is the most exciting board right now with Magnus's d4, but this is the update. We see on 3 of the 4 boards, black has gone for the pawn structure with e5, f6. So the players feel like that is the way to develop that bishop on g8, to open up the queen, to take control of the center. It feels like the popular choice. Meanwhile, on the Ding Alireza board, Alireza striking early on in the center, a knight jumping in. But Peter, I still want to go back to our Magnus board. We see the openings on the other boards, but this is really where the fire is at. And I want to dive deeper into this pawn sacrifice. Niklas, perhaps you can help us out a little bit. What really happens if Nodirbek does go pawn hunting, and where is that initiative if we follow through with the line?
Yeah, well, first of all, needs to be pointed out, he doesn't have to take the pawn. He also could, for example, develop the knight to g6 or maybe play some other move. But I believe he will take this pawn because it is not even clear to me how white is going to regain it. The first move that Peter pointed out was queen b4, but now you hit the pawn on b7. Black doesn't want to give up this one, so you could play b6, for example. White takes the pawn on d4, and now a move like d5 or c5, they both make a lot of sense. You play d5, occupy the center, protected by the bishop. Next you go c5, open up this bishop as well, gain a tempo against the queen, and this is looking very natural. You could maybe also start with c5. You can decide here. So this is definitely not something that Nodirbek is going to worry about, I believe. Also, you could try to regain the pawn with the knight b3, also stopping c5. But once again, you lose some time. Black can maybe play similar moves as before, maybe bring this knight into a game, knight g6, knight takes d4. But it feels like the knight is not very stable and can also be kicked away. Or maybe black can use the time to activate this knight even further. So I don't really see any convincing options. We also saw this Danish gambit Peter mentioned with c3. Maybe
F4, I think.
Yes,
F4 first, and then if c5, then c3. I think that makes sense. Or maybe even to go b4 here.
Evans gambit,
Wow.
yeah.
Yes. Either way, maybe it's something like this. Magnus has in mind to sacrifice the pawn. b6, is that possible? Yes, it is, because after bishop e4 we still have d5, not losing this rook.
No, but breaking news. Nodirbek did not capture the pawn. He went for knight b6, and it's a very strange move. It's kind of a slightly empty move. It doesn't do much to the position. Of course, yeah, like you highlighted, that what's the problem with black's position? He just develops, but the temptation of grabbing that pawn and going unpunished was too tempting.
It seems like he wants to go maybe to c4 and target this pawn on b2 and give a really nasty check there. So for example, d takes e5. Maybe his idea is to go knight c4 directly, playing super aggressively here. Could that be? Maybe something like b3 and then take with the queen on e5. I mean, this is looking good, but the computer just says c3, everything is protected. Push the black pieces back and white is better. Wow. This was he didn't take that much time after d4. Knight b6 seems like it brings Magnus right back into a game. Okay, well, this may be a little bit exaggerated, but it definitely wasn't the critical approach for Nodirbek, Tanya.
Oh, and now it's Magnus Carlsen with head in hands. Knight b6 on the board. Once again, it's such a wild position that we have right now. Nodirbek not on his seats. I'm trying to think about what's really going on here, Peter. There are so many complex ideas. We were talking about maybe Nodirbek doesn't take on d4. Now does Magnus actually capture on e5? You're also inviting the black queen into the game. I would be hesitant to play d takes e5. It might be the best move according to the engine, but from a human perspective, it just seems to help Nodirbek in his cause of development.
Yeah, let's not forget the players don't have access, and Magnus is playing knight d3. He develops, he keeps on insisting, sacrificing that pawn. I also think that a lot of mind games is involved in this. Yeah, that for example, if you are Nodirbek, you are facing Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus, the world's best player, sacrifices the pawn with d4 on move 3 without being forced to do that. Then over the board, if you ask me, my first intention is, okay, how do I not capture? Yeah, because you kind of expect that Magnus played d4 with the intention after e takes d4 he's happy. So okay, let's find an alternative to it. Nodirbek opted with knight b6, opening up his knight. Now Magnus insisting on please take that d4 pawn, but now already things are a little bit different because black is unable to protect the pawn with c5. The knight on d3 is covering. Let's just highlight this, yes. Yeah, that after e takes d4, for example, now let's try to make which is
F4 comes
yeah, but
to-
then knight d5 and then knight e3 check is a
So F4, let's just have that on the
yeah.
board,
I
Peter.
wanted to highlight f4 and
Knight
now
d5.
we are threatening to capture. Black is unable to play c5, but black has knight d5
Takes on d4.
and then
you're-
knight e3 check, and then you will have your knight
But
f5.
what if you take and go queen b4? I'm hitting a rook on f8. I'm hitting the pawn
wow.
on b7.
Yes, this
And
is
it
also
works.
yeah, double attack, the double attack, and wins the game on the spot. Just how tricky and but yeah, knight b6. Don't.
We've got Magnus in the...
So the first few days when we did the analysis together, Levon would always mock me for wanting to sacrifice a pawn first. I didn't analyze with anybody, and they didn't like my ideas. So now I ended up sacrificing a pawn. I think he should probably have taken it. Now I think like my play. But I think it's kind of justified. I think I should have a very decent position now, unless I'm missing something tactically. So I'm pretty happy with the way things have gone now.
And Magnus Carlsen there, he's taking on the challenge. He says that, you know, first few days, I wanted to sacrifice a pawn. Now you try to refute it. He does believe that Nodirbek, in fact, should have gone for the most thematic, well, I don't know if thematic or not, but the most direct pawn capture. He looked happy with his position now after knight to d3.
Yes, okay. It's certainly an improved version of d4. Yeah, when he sacrificed the pawn, he could be only the end. Look at this.
It
Yeah.
looks like Nodirbek is having a confession booth on the board right now. He's talking to himself, and we got Levon in.
Hey folks, daily routine of preparation is analyzing some different lines for 10 minutes with somebody or alone, and then playing something completely different. Yeah, I thought that e4 probably makes sense, and I think the position occurring is kind of interesting because I don't think black can do the symmetry because the knight f5 will be unpleasant, so it makes sense to play e4, I guess. We think we analyzed d4 f5, but during the game I thought that ef, queen h5, f3, queen f5 is just too many tempi for white, so it should be okay for white. Right now, I think Fabiano is considering playing bishop c4. I looked at this, I mean, just now I thought about it, probably knight c2, d5, b3. I mean, this bishop a6 is strategically very risky, because I can always play c4 and cut the bishop out from the game by sacrificing a pawn. So don't think black. I mean, he really needs to think before playing bishop c4. And of course d5 is a natural move, but then I think I will go knight d3 and, you know, try to quickly castle to one of the sides and keep this queen a5 check option. That's why I haven't played c3 yet. I don't know, or queen b4. I don't know if it makes sense at the moment, but I'll definitely consider this type of possibilities. Just to play bishop c5 and then the queen will enter from that side. So that's the plan. Should be slightly better for white, feeling, because somehow I think the symmetry doesn't work so well here. But we'll see. Maybe I'm just overestimating my chances, as usual.
I love that. Levon, optimistic about his position, happy with the way things have started, and just a few points that he made, Peter. It's something that we were looking at another board, the inability of black to actually play copycat chess from the very start. And if we go back to move number 1 here, after e4, e5, knight g3, an idea that we discussed in another game, that in fact, yes, right here, that black cannot continue with bringing his own knight out because of the concept of that g7 pawn. And now you're just not able to defend it anymore. And actually, white would just end up being an extra pawn up. So because of that, f6 and e5 is such a key structure. And then if we go to our current board, there were these lines that he was looking at with bishop c4. Peter, break that analysis down for us.
Yes, just before we jump right in there, let me go back to the very first move, because you remember after e4 I was my first intention was what happens after f5. Yeah, let's just clarify this, and Levon has revealed that the first question was also that, yeah, what happens after f5, and after realizing that e takes f5, queen takes h5 check can be simply met by f3, queen takes f5, and then knight g3, Levon was saying that he believed that white is getting too many tempis and will get the control and should benefit white in the long run. So if we are not afraid of this line, e4, f5, then e4 makes perfect sense. And as Levon highlighted, it's one of the most important themes of so far Fischer and Dom chess, freestyle chess here for us as well, that can black or should black play the copycat chess? And yeah, beautifully highlighted that after e4, e5, knight g3, knight g6 is impossible, so black plays the flexible move f6. Now white plays f3, and after c6, it is white who strikes first in the center with d4. Levon basically spoiled us with all his insights. Yeah, that first of all he wants to keep that pawn on c2 for the moment, eventually eyeing some queen a5 check at the right moment, because let's take a look. The bishop from g1 is also eyeing that diagonal, so you never know exactly. There is some tremendous pressure there, and the lines that Levon mentioned were involved with bishop c4, or that black can also try to place d5, playing in the center, which is maybe the most natural looking move. We see the evolution by immediately jumping into white's favor. And what happens after bishop c4? What we do know from Levon, that he said that yes, bishop c4 is a tempo, but eventually if that bishop is kicked away, let me try to play a move like knight c2. And just to highlight that after b3, bishop a6, Levon did reveal us that he's intending to shut out that bishop with a timely c2, c4. Very interesting. As usual, Levon is an optimist, but if looking at his position, occupying the center, having an extra tempo, why shouldn't he be optimistic?
Definitely, and especially if you get this pawn structure, Peter, that you were highlighting, with the pawns taking control of all the key squares, your knights are already out. Eventually, you're looking at perhaps just moving this bishop one square, or maybe even all the way to d3, and not there, but a queenside castle to get the rook on the d file. So things are looking good for Levon right now, or at least that there is pressure. Fabi has to answer some early questions in the center on the board. Going to turn over to Nicholas for that. d4, a very active approach by Lev. What do you make of this opening idea, Nicholas? And do you think Fabi should take some drastic action with d5 right now?
Yeah, d4 occupying the center, the pawn is protected by the bishop, and the knight as so often can maybe come behind the pawn on d3, not in front of it. And this is certainly a critical moment for Fabiano Caruana. He should not react in the center of d5, because as Levon pointed out, he will play knight d3, maybe the queen can come out to b4 or to a5, and it's really useful that the white pawn is still on c2 and not on c3 yet, because the queen can become active in this way. And especially if the queen comes to b4, it immediately hits this pawn on b7, and that's something you have to worry about. So instead of going d5, the computer either wants to play a slow bishop c7, maybe preparing slowly long castle, then you only need to move the knight and then you can castle long, or to develop this knight. But once you develop this knight, you always have to be looking out for knight f5 and how you deal with this pawn. And here it seems that you can respond by going knight g7. This is not an easy idea to find, but the point is that if you take on g7 now, then black plays queen g6. The knight is almost trapped, doesn't have many squares, and knight f5, now you win back the pawn. And here black would be, oh, actually, instead of taking this pawn, you can take this pawn, which would be much more powerful, and black is even much better. So d4, knight g6, probably a good choice. Bishop c7, there are also other moves available, but a critical moment for Fabiano. And as we talk about trapped knights, Tanya, I was just focusing on another game where one player already has a winning advantage. Should we go over there?
Yes.
Wow.
So it seems that Liren is continuing to struggle, because he has ended up with the white position in a lost, with the white pieces, in a lost position already after 7 moves. So let's go through it real quick. d4, f5, c3, we saw this briefly. Now f3 was played, e5. Firuza strikes in the center first. Knight to d3, knight to g6. So far so good. Knight g3 is already a step in the wrong direction. Firuza plays f4, hitting this knight, very natural move. And probably Ding was relying on this move knight h5, going after this pawn. But here Firuza plays the very powerful and somewhat hidden move that we just saw in the other game as well as a potential line, knight ge7. Bring the knight back, hitting this knight on h5. And here, as opposed to the other game, if you take on g7 after queen g6, you don't even have any square to fall back on and the knight is just trapped. Maybe Ding was seeing this, but maybe he missed it. After queen h4, there's g5 also already on the board. And he has taken this pawn. This seems to be another mistake. It seems like the best try was to play something like queen g4, bishop e6, and then to play a counterattack on the queen with knight g7, even though also then it will probably be a difficult position. Instead of the queen takes g5, rook f5, this is the idea. This is why the queen was lured to g5. Now the rook is attacking the queen and the knight is right behind it. And honestly, well, it seems like this is just a piece. Of course you get another pawn, maybe this is what Ding is relying on, but we can see the variation. It does not seem to be enough. And Ding in huge trouble from the start. Tanya.
Nightmare just continues for Ding Liren, and I'm thinking about his World Championship match against Yan, where really, he was playing so many different opening ideas. Every game felt like there was something fresh he and Rihard were coming up with, and relying on complicating matters in the middle game and the end game. We saw so many turnarounds in that World Championship match. And coming into this format, Peter, to my head, it felt like it would be really something that would suit Ding's style. Where there isn't so much opening preparation. He hasn't been super active after the World Championship. He's played one Tata Steel, not having that opening preparation. Perhaps it's really exactly what Ding needs. But, I mean, the story's just been a horror for Ding in this.
Look at him. Look at this. No, he's just.
What is going on here?
He's psychologically, emotionally completely finished. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, he's trying, but he's always running into some trouble right at the very beginning. Yeah, he's causing the trouble, and how do you explain it to yourself? Everybody else gets a normal game, plays a normal game of chess, and can show their skills. And poor Ding always steps into some minefield. Right from the very beginning, he never gets a normal, stable position where he can just play chess, and he just gives. He needs to. No, he does not give up. He lost the piece. He blundered the piece or whatever. In any case, he needs to make a desperate piece sacrifice now, or call it a desperate piece sacrifice. Black will take on h5 with the queen most probably. Yeah, queen takes h5, and then somehow to take on e5. Open up that bishop and hope to get some kind of a play, but piece is a piece.
I mean, this is just unbelievable. I mean, Ding, he's just one of the best players in the world, right? For such a long time. The absolute best. I don't know how long it's been since he's been in the world top 10. Winning the World Championship, and just the mental fortitude he even showed during the World Championship. So many times it was him who had to bounce back in that match. He had to strike back. And he did it, time after time. And to see this happen is just, it's just unreal. It makes no sense to me. And this is the position. I mean, these almost feel like elementary tactics that at the end of it that you're walking into. Something is really wrong. The knight on h5 is trapped. You take on g5 here, Peter. Rook steps up, the double attack on h5. You're pointing out the couple of pawns that you end up gaining, but it's not enough compensation.
No, not enough at all. I believe that also we should go back to the very start to understand what provoked Ding to play the way he played. And I believe that by looking around at other boards, he's already so much regretting his first move. This first move, d4, was very unfortunate. Looking around after the move e4, White was getting a very harmonious position where there is absolutely no danger at white. All your pieces are getting developed quietly. So what happened here?
But
Finally,
also, Peter, you remember Levon in the confession booth, he was discussing it with Ding, and he said that, you know, I was looking at different ideas. They were looking at d4, f5, but he felt when he sat on the board that, you know, he wants to go for the e4 approach, seeing that black cannot play copycat chess. Meanwhile, Ding just went ahead with the analysis that they had and got into early trouble early on.
Yeah, and I feel like Ding maybe fell into the trap that we have seen this d4, f5 backfiring so far for black in many of the games. A very fresh example, Levon versus Vincent. Already there was Vincent versus Levon in the round robin, but I immediately pointed out that there is a very big difference that after c3, the bishop does attack the pawn on f5, but it's protected. Yes, so this problem of getting a tempo does not apply to this position for black. So black simply continued developing the bishop. He is not weakening his structure. Now Ding played f3, highlights that he is maybe trying to fight for the center, but black immediately strikes with e5, and suddenly at this moment already I have a very awkward feeling, because who is white? Who is the one who is getting the initiative? It's one black. And yesterday the very same thing happened to Ding, that he allowed Abdusattorov to push f7, f5 compared to Magnus Carlsen's Alireza Firuza's game, right? And immediately was at the receiving end, and probably all these nightmares kind of thoughts are coming back to him, that how did I let my opponent get the center? You are under pressure already. So he's trying to make sense of his position. He's developing the knight to d3, putting some pressure on the e5 pawn, but black now very comfortably develops with the knight from h8 to g6, protecting, guarding that e5 pawn. And again, if, of course, you don't need to blunder like Ding blundered, but already black has a very harmonious position. And normally when your opponent gets to harmonious, that provokes you to some extravagant play. So he felt like, okay, let me make sense of all the moves that I have played so far. Yeah, we already see that Alireza has now captured Ding's knight, so knight gc f4. Then you continue in the spirit, you try to play in the spirit, and you are suddenly countered by the incredible knight g6 to e7, which is always a knight move going back. So easy to miss, and now there is no way back. Knight takes g7, queen g6 traps the knight, and g4, g6 traps the knight as well. Yeah.
I mean, you make a move like knight h5, you better be sure about that move. You have to calculate and look into those things, because that knight from h5, there's no way home for that knight. All the squares are controlled with that f4 pawn. And Peter, yes, retreating knight moves are the hardest moves on the board, but how many times have I seen Ding make those exact moves? I'm thinking Sinquefield Cup, his game against Magnus Carlsen. He beat Magnus with an incredible knight retreating move. I think it was actually knight to e7 only, if I'm not wrong. But maybe, chat, you can check that out. It was from the playoffs between Ding and Magnus. Ding won with the black pieces. And to me, knight h5, walking into this, self-trapping your knight, this is not the Ding that I'm used to, or anyone is used to at all.
No, not at all. And the body language, everything.
Queen h3, bishop e6, I think, just finishes the game.
Okay, there is g4, but then f takes g3. Let's just have that on the board because it's beautiful. Yeah, queen h3. For example, bishop e6, yeah, and after g4, which seems to save the knight and the queen, but then suddenly en passant comes, and it's a double attack again on the queen and on the knight. The queen has to capture on g3, then we lose the knight on h5, and it's game over. So yeah, shocking, there is no escape. So after g5, Ding was of course not planning to take on g5, but okay, what to do? Already rook f5, queen g4 now. Alireza even takes with the rook, showing some ambition. He wants to get probably bishop e6 tempo as well. He keeps on harassing white's queen. And Alireza is also such a player who is not worried of, okay, my opponent might have some compensation. No, it's a piece. I'm going to calculate some lines and I'm going to win this game.
And that king on d8 is absolutely safe. You don't really see an attack developing against it, an initiated developing against it, because it's Alireza's pieces who are going to come out into the game with a tempo. Moves like bishop e6, moves like even queen g8 or queen g6, eventually offering a queen trade. It is Ding's queen that is under pressure. You have to make sure that you actually have an escape route at some point. Taking on e5 to me seems like the only way to actually continue in this position with white. Ding Liren in big trouble. Niklas, do you see any way out for him? And yeah, this is, or is this just busted for white?
Well, if you ask the engine, it is just busted here. I mean, you will now take the pawn on e5 because what else are you going to do? Just try to grab another pawn. Now at least you have at the moment 2 pawns for the piece, but you don't have a lot of activity. Not a lot of pieces are developed, and black can continue in various ways. But knight d5 makes a lot of sense to develop this knight again, bring it into the center, also protecting the pawn on f4. And threatening to maybe take on e5. Also, this is a very unpleasant pawn on f4 for the white pieces. What to suggest? I guess take another pawn on f4. Okay, then we trade off. Queen takes. Now I can take on e5 in various ways, but bishop takes makes a lot of sense. And yeah, this is not great at all. It is busted. No, I mean, I think this game might not even last that much longer because white doesn't have any ways to complicate the game, as at least as far as I can see. So it has gone horribly wrong for Ding, and unfortunately for him, he continues to be in terrible shape here, Tanya.
All right, well, and you can see it on him. He realizes that this once again has just been an absolute disaster.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's just really tough to watch.
This is heartbreaking, yeah.
All right, should we move on to, because I do see that there have been a lot of moves in the Magnus Nodirbek matchup. And from when we left it last, Nicholas, a completely different position. Maybe you can just update us and break it down. What's going on here?
Yeah, definitely. So we saw both players did not want to, or Nodirbek did not want to accept Magnus's pawn sacrifice here, offered twice. And instead he went d6, a solid move. And here Magnus had the chance also to solidify his position by going c3. And this would have been quite a nice move, also opening up the bishop, keeping the center control, and white would probably have a slight edge. Instead, he played the move f3, which is another way to protect the pawn on d4, but you don't have the center control now. Nodirbek took on d4, the bishop came out, and c5 was played. The bishop has to move immediately again. The bishop dropped back to f2. And now Nodirbek played c4. Nodirbek is really playing aggressively, or at least that's my feeling. He's going for the knight. And interesting moment now, Magnus is thinking here. According to a computer, he's supposed to take on b6. But this is not a move that we're happy to make, giving up the dark squared bishop. However, if you move the knight immediately, let's say to b4, even though I'm not really happy to move it to b4, let's say I move it to, where do I move it to? If I move to f4, there's queen e5 coming with a double attack immediately on b2 and e5. So I would be quite worried about that. But if I move it to b4, well then queen b5 is coming and I suddenly have to deal with the threat of a5. And this knight, we've already been talking about trapped knights. It doesn't have any square right now. The threat of a5 is looming. So c4, at least practically quite a challenging move, because Magnus will not be happy to give up his bishop. So he has some safety for the knight. This is the idea. So now the knight cannot be attacked by a pawn via a5 and the knight is safe. However, you give up this beautiful dark squared bishop, and quite an ambitious move by Nodirbek, Peter.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to the fifth move. I think it's just fantastic. It just shows the mind games the players are playing, that there was a chance after move 3 to take on d4, e takes d4, and the pawn cannot be recaptured. Black ignores it, black plays knight b6, white keeps on offering that pawn, please knight d3, take it, I don't care. Nodirbek says, no thank you, I haven't taken before, I'm not going to take it now. So d6, a stabilizing move now. Magnus finally protects that pawn on d4 with the bishop, and Nodirbek takes on d4 exactly at this very right moment when the pawn is protected. It just, I feel like this is some fantastic stuff. Psychological game, e takes d4, bishop takes d4, c5, bishop f2, and now the move c5, c4, putting pressure on Magnus. The good news is we see Magnus taking his time. He will understand that, yeah, there we have it, bishop takes b6 check, is on the board.
Process of elimination.
Exactly. And the good thing for white is, yeah, now clearly white's knight will move to b4. And then white will try to set up all his pawns to the dark square. c3, e3, queen e2. And let's not forget that, yes, black has lovely dark squares, but white has some beautiful squares for his knights. Knight on b4 is wonderful. The knight from g3 eventually can jump to d4. There can be perfect harmony. It's a very double-edged position, of course. Everything depends on the next couple of moves, but I see that strategically also white can be quite happy if he gets everything.
Now, once again, bishop takes knight, not an easy decision to make, but when you realize that there is no other option, then it becomes slightly easier to play this move. And now it's all about how much of those blockades can actually Magnus achieve in this position on the dark squares. Because imagine if this pawn ever got to d4. The bishop opens up and suddenly we're talking about the bishop pair advantage playing. I think the big question for Nodirbek will also be about king safety in this position. I can envision a long-term short side castling to try to get the king to safety. But the first question will be, can actually black immediately try to push in the center? I want to open up the dark squared bishop, which right now cannot be challenged, Peter. I also want to highlight another point, why knight b4 and not knight f4? And I think, Nicholas, you brought it up really well. Always watch out for loose pieces. LPDO, loose pieces drop off, sometimes loose pawn drops off as well. b2 would have been a problem, so knight b4 was really the only square. To me, if I was playing black, the two moves that come to mind is knight g6. I want my knight into the game as quickly as possible, or start expanding in the center. I'm loving Nodirbek's approach as well. I see the trumps that you pointed out in Magnus's position. I think I would want to be black here, Peter. I'm biased towards the bishop pair.
Okay, let's then make a couple of moves. So yes, I see that d5 is very tempting. Yeah, for you, of course, yeah, you have to open up, and for me also clear that most probably c2, c3 is my next move. Give me one more move, queen d2, and I will be perfect. Honestly, one of the main moves that I'm worried about is bishop b8 to f4, getting direct control of the dark squares, not allowing me to set up e3 or queen d2. Then I might have some knight jump with knight h5 or knight whatever, but yeah, one of the lines that was really intriguing for me is that bishop f4, knight f5, hitting that pawn, and after g6, can I play a move like e3, kicking that bishop away? Yeah, because this bishop on f4 is such a monster, such a beast, and I cannot rely on the d4 square if I just prematurely jump back that, okay, let me sit on d4. I feel that the dark squares and the king being completely cut would be way too risky for white. And that's why g6, e3 is obligatory. I have to kick that bishop. And then, as you highlighted, black's king. Because you can go long castle, but still you might even run into some a4, a5 business. Yeah, and the rook on a1 will feel super happy. I'm happy with white.
All right, well, I think there's one person in the studio who can break the tie for us. We're looking at this position, pointing out the different aspects for both white and black, the strengths in the position. I'm biased towards the bishop pair, the free-flowing center. I'm dreaming of that knight as well, developing to g6 and hopefully land on either e5 or f4, maybe from g6 or from f7 someday. But yes, black does require a lot of moves. Nicholas, break the tie for us. Would you rather be white or black here?
You're really putting me on the spot here, Tanya. It is a difficult decision because I also do love the bishop pair and I see the weaknesses in the white camp. However, I also see the weaknesses in the black camp with the structure here on the queen side with the double pawns. This pawn has come forward quite far, so the square on d4 is weak, the square on b4 is weak. And I think the next few moves will really decide who I would prefer. And d5 makes a lot of sense. d5, also gaining some space. Now c3 makes sense, and I believe this is also the move we were checking. And now you are looking at bishop f4. Maybe there's also bishop d6 to potentially give up the bishop pair again, taking on b4, but weakening the white structure in the process. And it is a really, really fascinating position.
Is there anything to be said, sorry, after
Yes.
c3, if you